Hello everyone, John Maher here. This is your weekly Grass10 update on the dairy edge. Well, at last a big improvement in the weather has arrived. The level of grass growth over the week gone by was average. We had good spells of growth, but also colder nights there spells. But it was average. But the predicted growth for this week anyway is almost double, given an improvement in weather and the sun is shining. So that's good to see. Grass supply is running at about 900 kilograms of dry matter per hectare from the pasture-based Ireland figures, and that's really irrespective of whether or irrespective of the level of grazing having taken place. So I'm basically saying those who have grazed have 900, those who haven't grazed have around 900. So that's the way the weather has come and the way the pattern of growth has been. So there is grass out there, I suppose that's the way to say it. With the improvement in the weather, the soil temperatures have risen also. And this combined with the better weather has allowed a lot of people to get fertiliser to be spread and slurry hopefully to be applied, especially to the silage ground, which is where it should be targeted at. This may not always be possible now, it depends on the cover grass in the field and the trafficability, but there is opportunity to get slurry and fertiliser out now because the year is moving on. For the record, dry matters are running around 15 to 16%. When we look more at the grass stats from PBI, we can see that there is a big range there in what's going on. So about 50% of farms have either little or no grazing done from the pasture-based data. And then there is another bunch of about 30% of farms on pasture-based on the dairy side have over 30% grazed. And I suppose the remaining 20% have somewhere between 10 and 30% grazed. So the range is there in terms of grazing, but the farm cover remains broadly around 900. That's the way it's running at. I suppose another 50% of farms have very little nitrogen out, and I suppose that's where the challenge is between fertiliser and slurry to get moving on that now and play catch up as the year is moving on. And as I said, the soil temperatures have risen, so that should help things as well. But I suppose the main priority now is to get grazing, as many farms have plenty of grass, and to get grazing as much as possible. And some can actually go day and night now because they have so much grass and the weather has improved. And while grazing is a priority, it's especially important to prioritise grazing if there's a low level of fodder available. And I do see some backwalls on my travels of the silage pits, which I would hope I wouldn't see. It's also a priority where where there is silage, but the silage quality is poor. That's having an impact on milk production and particularly the milk solids. Where farms are very high demand, it's important to get grazing as well. And there are farms who will struggle with accommodation, and being out grazing makes life a lot easier for both people and the beasts. Looking at the overall thing, then, as grazing is behind on some farms, to be honest, it kind of does mean a kind of a rethinking of the grazing plan. I suppose the first thing to do is walk the farm to see where we're at in terms of grass supply, see where we're at in terms of grazing additions. There's huge variation out there in paddocks, even paddocks beside one another. One can be damp and one can be quite grazable. So that variation exists. Some of that's a reflection of what happened last autumn. Some it's a reflection of the level of grass growth on the farm. Where grass is grown well, they're often that bit drier. So I suppose farms with a small amount of grazing done, they'll have to adjust their grazing plan now. It may or may not mean, depending on the level of demand or her demand, whether the silage ground gets grazed or not. You're at that point now at this stage, at coming into the third, fourth week of March, that decisions have to be made on silage ground. I know some people will split the nitrogen application on silage ground, and that buys them maybe a week or two or three in terms of whether they will need to graze or not. If you apply all the fertiliser to silage ground, well, then I suppose you're more likely on a one-way ticket. So a bit of thinking to be done here. It'll depend a bit on how the weather goes. It'll depend a bit on the level of grass supply on the farm, whether silage ground is or isn't grazed. I know some farms don't have access to silage ground, that's fine, but there's decision making to be done here. For those who are not sure, you can hedge by splitting the fertiliser application, I suppose, right? Speaking of fertiliser applications, I suppose, if there's little or no fertiliser spread, we need to get 35 units out of nitrogen as soon as we can to get moving for most farms. Some of the heavier farms will start looking at that now. On the drier farms, I'd certainly like to start including sulphur in the fertiliser if at all possible. Irrespective of all those things, we are, for some farms, 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks away from starting the second rotation because they have a nice bit of grazing done, especially those who are drier. And when you start a second rotation, you need an average farm cover of about 650, maybe 700. If you're lower stock, maybe 600. I say that for a reason because wherever your farm cover is now, that's what you have to work towards. So, for example, if your target farm cover was about 650 and you had 950 and you're 3 weeks away, that means the farm cover can drop about 100 a week. We're now in the stage of the year where checks and balances have to put in place. What percentage of the farm is grazed? How much have I left? How long will it take me to get to the point where the second round should start? What cover is on the first grazed paddocks? As a guide, on the 17th of March, generally look for a cover about 650, 700 to start the second round, 7, 8, 9, 10 of April. For many, that's a bit delayed this year, but it is a guide, and it's not just one paddock now; it's a good few. So most don't have that. Some people will have an odd one, but that's kind of we need to start to be looking at those checks and balances of where we're at. How much can the farm cover drop? How much left to graze? How much grass do we need to allocate to the animals to get to where I need to be? And what is the level of recovery on the first grazed paddocks? Have they got their nitrogen, fertiliser, or slurry allocation to keep them moving? So I suppose many farms would probably look at starting the second rotation, though, looking at the stats from PBI, somewhere around the 14th to 20th of April, depending on the level of grass grazed and the level of recovery. But they need to be monitored, I suppose. That's the point in getting at now, really. I suppose when you look at the major stats from pasture base, you will say that about 30% of the farm grazed by the 17th of March, which tells me then that most of them will start the second rotation somewhere about the 14th of April. For the rest, it'll be a lot closer to the 20th as a guide. The problem with that is the level of grass growth starts to increase enormously in April. At the start of April, it's around 30. 10 days later, it's 40. Next 10 days is 50. And by the 1st of May, it's 60. So things happen fast. And sometimes you can go too slow and the grass get ahead of you. And sometimes you graze extra ground that you shouldn't graze, that should have been closer silage. So there's a bit of planning in it and a bit of monitoring, to say the least. And now that the weather's improved, there's the opportunity to start looking at those plans a bit more. So to our future farmer then, Liam Rochford. So Liam is based in Wexford. Now we purposely went after a farm in the Wexford area for the newsletter because they have got the brunt of the rainfall pattern this spring. In the southeast corner has been way, way above normal compared to what they're used to. Saying that, by Patrick's Day, Liam had 17% of the farm grazed. His average farm cover was almost 1,000. Have been on Liam's farm before. It's a clay soil now, so it's as I say, not the driest. It can be challenging. When it gets dry, it's not too bad, but it soaks up the water very well, I suppose the best way of describing it, and takes a while to dry out. But it's been kind of, as Liam would say, very much on a knife edge, on-off grazing approach. It hasn't been easy. The weather's improved now, so hope things will improve. And Liam is looking at the next stage to try and get out in the evening time. So most of his grazing is done by on-off grazing, in which there's 4 or 5 kilos of grass gone in. He's on 5 kilos of meal. He's lucky he has good quality silage with 74 DMD, so that's not going so bad for him there. He has about 85% calved out of 150 cows, and his grazing platform is about 56 hectares. Meal kill currently running at 26.5 litres, 4.36% fat, and 3.3 protein. It's not unusual for me to hear the 3.3 protein when the cows are housed, and Liam is no different here. We do see, though, when cows get out to grass day and night, that it's a massive jump in the protein in particular and also the milk yield. So back to Liam's kind of day approach to grazing. If the weather is good enough, he'll go on and off. Some days the cows weren't able to go out, but his normal procedure when they do kind of get out is to milk at 7 a.m. and cows head for the paddock around 10 a.m., brought in about 1 p.m. and are in for the day then and offered good quality silage. This week now he's looking at trying to get out in the evening time to try and get moving and get more grass grazed because he has it. In terms of slurry and fertiliser, he's got a small bit of slurry out on the milking platform at about 2,500 gallons per acre with the dribble bar. But more slurry application is planned this week as the weather has improved. The fertiliser is in the yard and his plan is to go with 25 to 30 units per acre of protected urea with sulphur. Looking at the recovery on the grazed paddocks, as in many farms, the recovery is actually good on many farms, and I hope that trend continues, especially with the good growth this week. Haven't been on Liam's farm before. It is well served by a central roadway with multiple access, which allows him graze. Those kind of things start to matter when the weather is tricky. So that's Liam's story. It hasn't been an easy spring for the people in Wexford, but things are looking up despite the difficult spring. So that's the story this week for the Grass10 update on the Dairy Edge. If you'd like to hear more from the Grass10 team, subscribe to the weekly Grass10 newsletter, which is available on the Grass10 page on the Teagasc public website, and the link to this newsletter is also available in the description of this podcast. We'd also like to thank those who sponsor or support the Grass10 campaign, AIB, Grass and Agro, Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine, FBD and the Farmers Journal. This has been your Grass10 update, and I'll talk to you all next week when I hope the good weather continues.